you like to take some questions now for Professor Warren? So, lots of hands. Cheryl.
I know that generally scientists don't like to link specific weather events with climate change, but has the reduction in Arctic sea ice impacted the Gulf Stream, which led to the weather we saw this summer, in your opinion?
Well, that has been taken seriously, yeah, because something that scientists shy away from. The question was, is the weather events of this year in Britain and in the US related to Arctic sea ice retreat? And that has been seriously put forward. Normally, scientists don't like, when something like that happens, they say, well, you mustn't confuse weather with climate, because climate scientists are always getting harassed by somebody who says, well, how can you say the climate's warming because I looked out my window today and it was snowing, so it's not really. But if you do look at a trend, something that's anomalous over several months, which is what we've had, and the patterns of pressure, atmospheric pressure that are associated with it, it does seem as being some kind of anomalous behaviour of the jet stream, the boundary between polar air masses and lower latitude air masses. And the position of that boundary is affected by whether there's sea ice present or not, because having an ice surface affects evaporation, and it affects the wind direction, the wind speed. So it has been kind of put forward that the anomaly we've had, which has been nasty, and the sort of heat anomaly that the Americans had, is all to doing with this anomalous movement of the jet stream, which is connected with this unusual sea ice retreat. So we'll see next year, basically, because the sea ice is going to still be in retreat next year, and if we get some anomalous weather patterns as well, then that link will become more accepted. Yes.
Okay, John.
Yes. I'm concerned, and I wonder what you think about it. So, I'm concerned that, and I wonder whether you share my concern, that the sea ice could go completely next year. I do, my feeling is it won't, and is it certain to be gone by 2015?
No, it's not certain as it will be gone, and I don't think it will go next year, but the trend of volume is such that that trend goes to zero in about 2015. What might happen is that you'll have a sort of fringe of this older ice where it still exists, that will still be there. So it won't absolutely be ice-free, but it will be effectively ice-free. The fringe of older ice is maybe a million square kilometres or something, but something quite small. So as far as, for all practical purposes, the Arctic will be ice-free in about 3 years' time, even if there's still a small amount of sea ice left.
I wonder if I could ask a question, actually, which I hope people will be interested in, but I'm intrigued to know there's been, I think, some disputes within the academic community, so I'm wondering what your view is on why everybody doesn't immediately accept what you're saying with the academic community, where other people are coming from and why they have a different view of the situation.
Yes, I don't know, I was surprised because we've published all of this stuff. So everybody's well aware of the thinning, for instance, which comes from submarine data. This year, there's a new satellite gone up, CryoSat, which is giving data which agrees with our results. That's showing a thinning, a rapid thinning. And so when you take the thinning and the measured retreat and combine them, you really are down to kind of collapse mode. and there isn't any way looking at that data, you could draw any other conclusion. But some people do, and it seems to be modellers who work for government labs. I won't name any names, but I will actually. The UK Met Office, which specifically contradicted this idea when they gave testimony. Actually, in February, I think they would probably change their minds now. But they said it's impossible that there could be any disappearance of the summer sea ice because their modellers tell them that it can't happen. So that's a case of preferring a model to data, and that's unfortunately happens a lot these days in science because there's a lot of modellers and not many field researchers left because it's cheaper. It's cheaper to be a modeller. You sit there with a computer, it doesn't cost your lab so much as sending you out into the field. So science is now full of modellers and doesn't have so many field researchers. And modellers believe their models and really resent any data that might not agree with the model. So in any battle between the model and data, the modellers will go for the model. But that's Richard Feynman, a very famous physicist, said, you know, if there's a contradiction between data and theory, then the theory is wrong. So,
Thanks. That's a very fascinating answer, I think. I just wanted to say that some of you might have wondered, John Bedell was on the Guardian environmental correspondent, was on the slate. Well, he is due to arrive later, a bit like between 8 and 8:30, so hopefully he will. But that's the plan anyway. Just in case you're wondering. So meanwhile, there's kind of a forest of hands. This lady.
Hi, I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about the impact it will have on. Sorry. Hi. Could you talk a little bit about the impact this might have on animals that live in the area? We see species becoming extinct. Wildlife. Thanks.
Well, the polar bears will be affected, obviously, very badly because they den along the coast, and when they come out of their dens not having eaten during the winter, they have to go out onto the ice and hunt seals, and if there isn't any ice there, they can't hunt seals. So they'll suffer quite severely, although this fringe of ice across the north of Greenland and Ellesmere Island will provide a stretch of coastline that they can still use. So there will be still a habitat for polar bears in the north of Greenland and Ellesmere Island, but around a lot of the rest of the Arctic it will be very difficult.
So around Greenland, you say?
Yes, so, well, the north coast of Greenland and the north coast of Ellesmere Island, that's where the kind of ice will be making its last stand. And there the polar bears will be okay. But where the ice is retreating, especially retreating earlier in the summer, then that will be really quite serious. And of course,
you might see their numbers decline.
Yes, because they can't swim all that far. So if they come out of their dens in the spring and to look for seals and there's open water there, they really had it. So they might start taking up the habits of ordinary bears because it wasn't that many thousands of years ago that they evolved out of other bears, so they could go back to hunting salmon in rivers and so on. So that's everybody thinks of polar bears, but it's actually a much bigger problem than that because the whole marine ecosystem of the Arctic is changing and in fact it's changing towards a lot more life in it because you're now getting more light coming in the spring, and you're getting a plankton bloom happening earlier that it didn't used to happen because when there's ice there, there's no light penetration. So you're getting potentially a complete change of the marine ecosystem. We don't know in what direction it'll go, but it's going to be different from the way it's been.
Yeah. And another thing I quickly mention is we do hope to have later on, there's a presentation that I will give if we get a chance. It is about the effect of the Arctic and the jet stream and weather extremes. Just flag up that that's in the pipeline. This gentleman here, I'm going to go with that.
You mentioned geoengineering solutions. I wonder how far you consider them to be realistic, and if so, which one might, in your view, have some potential for beneficial change?
I suppose you want to do no harm, I suppose it's a bit like a doctor. And one that has been proposed by a member of this of the Arctic Methane Emergency Group, which is the group that's involved with this meeting, is being proposed by Stephen Salter at Edinburgh University and some other colleagues, which involves injecting very finely divided water particles through a very fine nozzle into low-level clouds, and that whitens them, and that increases their albedo, so the clouds become whiter, and it doesn't seem that would have an effect, but it does, and that would be enough if you had enough of these nozzles which would be mounted on masts on ships. It would be possible to change the albedo of the Earth. And the advantage of that, I suppose, is that water particles they're not going to have any side effects that are nasty. Other methods that have been proposed involve injecting particles into the exhausts of high-flying jets and then spewing them out into the stratosphere, where they will produce an aerosol that reflects radiation. That could equally could work, but there's a certain risk that you're polluting the atmosphere with some substance which might have some nasty effects that you don't know about, whereas you know about water vapour. So it's likely to be benign, whereas other methods might not. So I would favour trying methods that look as if they're not going to have, they're less likely to have nasty side effects. And so this method of injecting water into clouds to whiten them looks like something I think should be investigated very strongly.
Right, I've been a bit biased to the front, so let me try and take somebody from the back. Yeah.
It seems that you have quite a lot of data on the Arctic, the actual Arctic Ocean situation. Could you tell us a little bit more about what's happening with the Greenland situation? What is the chance of any collapse happening with the ice shelf on Greenland?
Well, the Greenland is melting at an accelerated rate. Until about 10 years ago, it didn't melt at all. And then you started to get a certain amount of melt on the surface in the summer. But people didn't worry about that because they thought, well, it freezes again in autumn. And you calculated it would take about 3,000 years for the ice sheet to melt, even with climate warming, because of this melting and refreezing. But then suddenly they discovered the water's not sitting on the surface, it's going down holes called moulins, which are just great big holes in the ice sheet, and going down to the bottom of the ice sheet, warming the ice sheet all the way through, and accelerating the flow of it over the bedrock. And so suddenly this 3,000 years starts to look a bit too complacent, and the speed of melt has gone up until now the Greenland ice sheet is the biggest single contributor to sea level rise. It's as much as putting in as much ice into the ocean as all the rest of the melting glaciers put together. So if that carries on accelerating, the ice sheet itself will, I think, last hundreds of years, not thousands. I mean, I don't think it'll collapse, but it will be melting faster and faster, and so that its biggest impact will be an accelerated impact on global sea levels.
Right. Any ideas of thoughts? I'll say this one.
Two questions. Do you have any comments about the situation in Antarctica? Are any of the similar problems occurring there? And the second question is about reaching tipping points where there's no further control can be taken by humans and you end up with catastrophic climate change which affects the future of all of us.
Well, Antarctica is a bit weird in that the sea ice actually is advancing there, embarrassingly, but it's advancing about half as fast as the Arctic is retreating. So you add them together, you're still getting a loss of ice. But equally, the climate models that are failing to predict this rapid retreat of Arctic sea ice are also failing to predict the advance of Antarctic sea ice, because they're saying the Antarctic should be retreating slowly. So the models are wrong, but why it's advancing is a fairly complex picture. The other thing about Antarctica is there has been beginning measurements of the ice sheet melting in the summer. So again, Antarctica didn't used to melt at all, but now there's a small amount of melt happens in the summer. And this can be measured now. We can measure these things really accurately because there's a gravity satellite called GRACE, which is a kind of really clever satellite, which is actually two satellites close together, and they measure the gravity of the Earth, and they can measure very small differences in mass underneath the satellite. So they're the things that are measuring sea level rise really accurately, but they're also measuring the rise or fall of the Antarctic ice sheet and the Greenland ice sheet, and so they're showing the beginning of melt of the Antarctic ice sheet. And if that starts to take off, and you add it to the Greenland melt, that will really accelerate global sea level rise.
Could we have the other half of the question?
The other half of the question is about tipping points.
Oh, tipping points. Yes, well, tipping points, it's a word that's often used for, it shouldn't be used for a lot of things it's used for, but strictly you should use it for a situation where you're forcing a system, you're applying some stress to a system, and for a while, when you release the stress, it goes back to where it started from. So, like, if you've got a spring and you put a weight on the spring, it stretches it, and then you take the weight off, it goes back. So that's okay. And then if you stress it too much, like you put too big a weight on the spring, it goes beyond the elastic limit and it breaks or it deforms, then it doesn't go back to what it used to be when you take the stress away. So the question is, has the Arctic reached a tipping point? So a tipping point would happen if we take away the forcing from carbon dioxide. In other words, we get rid of all the extra atmospheric carbon dioxide. Will the ice come back? And that's a real uncertain thing at the moment, whether it would come back, because once it's gone in the summer, the structure of the ocean changes, that the water warms up, the whole circulation pattern of the ocean changes. It could be that it will change to a point where, even if by some miracle that we became very sane and we found ways to get rid of the CO2 in the atmosphere, it might not come back. So it's unsolved. People aren't agreed about whether the sea ice is at a tipping point, but it might be.
That's very interesting. So, would you like to say?
I think there's an alternative meaning for tipping point. alternative meaning for this
I'll
point.
just introduce you, shall I? It's
Yes.
John Nissen from the Arctic Methane Emergency Group, and he's been involved in lobbying Parliament to take urgent action about the Arctic and other things that the Arctic Methane Emergency Group do. So, John.
Yes, Peter and I submitted evidence to the Environment Audit Committee, and we were talking about the vicious cycle of positive feedback and how it's really caused a whole lot in the process. So the question is, can we stop it? How much faster is it getting? So are we approaching a point of no return? Because if you look at your handouts, one of the points is that we're talking about reaching the edge of the cliff, and we're toppling over the edge of the cliff as far as these feedbacks are concerned.
Okay. Would you like to respond to that?
Yes, I think we are in a very serious position from the effects that are arising from this decline of sea ice. So it's just how you define a tipping point is still the question.
Right. The gentleman.
Peter, Adrian Stewart Hill, nice to meet you. Just a few observations I'd like to make and put to you. I'm a member of Population Matters. It's a pressure group, it's an organisation and a charity. And we have a similar problem of people in denial, governments and politicians not listening. An observation I'd like to make that we are confronting issues we have never confronted in our evolution, our time on this planet. And maybe the political systems, the systems we have constructed, are just not up to meeting these challenges. I'd also like to...
question.
Yes, I'd also... Bear with me, if you would. I'd also like to put to you the reason the internet came about might be the solution to some of these problems. What else? 1 second. It's just that, yes, the question, Peter, do you think our political systems are capable of looking out for us all, or do we need some other system to address these issues we are confronting? Climate change is one, overpopulation, and as Sir David Attenborough said, one of our patrons, once we address overpopulation, all other issues, such as climate change and many, many more, suffering and hunger beyond our imagination, could be dealt with more easily.
Very big question. I don't know if you want to answer that.
Big question, yeah. But I agree that population is the same. It's the pressure in the same direction, and again, it's unprecedented. Present population, which does exceed the carrying capacity of the Earth. The problem, the extra problem we have, which is why I did mention the way in which just this climate change effect may have a big impact on food production, is that with the population as high as it is, we only survive through industrial agriculture. We could never go back to traditional agriculture because we could only support, I don't know what fraction of our present population, but a lot less. People are alive because we have industry, and the industry is producing fertilizers and pesticides and so on. So without that, we're already reliant on energy, and the trouble is that the energy that we're reliant on, we're producing through and emitting carbon dioxide. So there's a kind of multiple vicious circle of population, industry, energy, carbon dioxide, climate. it's very difficult to see how we're going to break out of it. And, under any political system, even if the will is there, which it isn't at the moment.
Right. I'm not sure how long we're able to keep you. This is fascinating. Well, just let us know. Yeah. Are there any ladies who'd like to ask a question? Yeah. Over there.
Question. It's just a response to what you said about population growth. Oh, sorry. Because I think I'm quite optimistic here, because there is a sort of agency of change, and that's women themselves. I mean, historically, we've been encouraged to produce more and more children. And in fact, mainly, given the choice, women would not have the large families that they've had. And at the moment, particularly in poor countries, where there's lots of pressures, economic, cultural, religious, patriarchal pressures on women to continue to have a lot of children. Here there's an estimated about 200 million, 250 million women who would like to be able to have smaller families, but are unable to access birth control. Also are unable to get general education, let alone sex education, to actually have the means and the rights to actually stabilise that population. So if women actually given education and given that right and access, women in their own wisdom will actually do a lot to stabilise population growth.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? Well, we've got Professor Waddens here. I'm very keen on getting people who are wanting to address him questions to him. So, yeah.
Yeah, hi. When this sort of data is presented on Newsnight, and Lily was on, and Natalie Bennett, the new leader of the Green Party, was on, and Paxman just got so depressed, he just said, oh, well, that's it, we give up. Now, my question for you is, I mean, obviously, there's this meeting here, but is there anybody in the establishment, or the government, or the media establishment, or wherever, who's taking this more seriously than Jeremy Paxman did, who said, okay, let's just give up? And so the question is, what contact are you and the Arctic Methane Emergency Group got? I mean, you mentioned the House of Commons Committee, but you know, what is the Department for Climate Change, the Secretary of State for Climate Change, for example, saying on this? Because I've not seen much on it, really, in the media.
Well, yes, I mean, we talked to the committee on the Environmental Audit Committee, which has got,
it's a mixture of people, but there were people there who are genuinely interested in the climate change problem. That was Caroline Lucas, the previous, the Green MP, and who I think was more effective than the lady who appeared on the Newsnight. And then some of the MPs on that committee are really concerned, and there is a climate change group of MPs which has meetings and lectures, and so MPs, it's a parliamentary, one of these interest groups, and that, but it's got less energetic than it used to be, and it doesn't have so many meetings. And these latest appointments by the government are pretty dispiriting, really. They're getting in people who don't really seem to be too concerned about climate change, and so it does look as if there's a weakening of interest at government level, possibly just due to one or two people, like the Chancellor seems to not be interested. It's the government science advisors are quite pushy. One of them is David Mackay. But yeah, it's a difficult question. I mean, there's the level of interest. Weirdly, I found was greater at government level in the days of Margaret Thatcher, because she was actually the first one to recognise climate change as being very important, first one